Hi guys, I'm Frank.
Hey, I'm Leo.
And welcome to a brand new episode of
Terror Recollect. Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of the second season of Terror Recollect. We hope you guys are enjoying the new format. We're definitely enjoying bringing you this new kind of style. It's something that we want to do a little bit different to kind of keep the show alive and vibrant and, ever evolving. And that's definitely something that we've enjoyed doing so far. What do you think, Frank?
Yeah, and if you guys might have noticed from our last episode of Halloween 4, what we did was we really went into detail and depth on that particular film. That's what we want to start doing from now on with a film or a film series, is we want to get in there to the nitty gritty, all the details, and dissect it, scene for scene.
Yeah, break it apart.
And one franchise that we really haven't touched on yet, which is actually very important to the both of us, is Nightmare on Elm Street. So what is our topic for today?
Well, if you can't tell by our subtle set dressing,
We try to make it as obvious. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you can tell, today we're going to be discussing our favorite entry in the Nightmare on Elm Street film series. And the film that we're going to be discussing is Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. Frank, can you give us a little background on the Nightmare on Elm Street series?
The series as a whole, I kind of compared it to Halloween in that they're very different. And what I mean by that is when in our previous episode we discussed how Halloween in the sequels, it kind of branches out to all these different different storylines. Yeah. Whereas the Nightmare on Elm Street, it actually follows the same story throughout the entire series. And it's very linear.
There's a consistency amongst the chapters. How many entries are there in the Nightmare on Elm Street series?
Are we counting the remake?
Well, even then, if you were to go into specifics, are we even counting Freddy? Would we even count Freddy versus Jason?
Let's stop at
Wes Craven's New Nightmare,
which is part 7.
I officially count the Nightmare on Elm Street series going from 1 to 7, even though after 5? After 5, they're not called... they're not given a number.
Right.
It's Freddy's dead, and then it's Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Yeah, they even dropped the Nightmare on Elm Street title. So, but for us, I mean, I can speak for myself, but for you, would you say that Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 is your favorite sequel?
I would have to say that it's a tie between this and Wes Craven's New Nightmare. That was real fun, and it had that kind of movie within a movie, kind of Screamish
I was about to say,
yeah.
I think I know why it's tied. Well, it's definitely a favorite sequel of yours amongst the Nightmare on Elm Street.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
For me, it is definitely my favorite sequel of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, but I think I can also say, or at least at this point in our conversation, it's my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie, period. Especially, I rewatched it last night to kind of brush up, and it really struck me how well made this movie is, and actors and filmmakers who are taking the content seriously. Yeah. They portray it like deathly serious. There is a character of a nun who, spoiler alert, well, all this is going to be spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors, and then come back. The nun who is Freddy's mom, or the ghost, the apparition of Freddy's mom, she plays it deadly serious. It's just, her name was Amanda Kruger. The child of it was a bastard son of 100 maniacs. And it's just like, damn. And even just the tone, the content, you're dealing with teenagers then, I guess, who are dealing with mental health issues.
In this film, it starts off with Kristen Parker in the real world who goes to sleep. Her mom tells her to go to sleep. It's time for bed. She goes to sleep and she has this nightmare.
Even the mom is very abrasive in Nightmare 3, the Kristen's mom. Like, she's just very short with her. It's just like, go to bed. What are you doing? It's past 1. How sad, where the kid isn't the priority of the parent. And in a sense, that's fertile ground for Freddy to attack.
Right.
Which, I mean, this movie does that a lot. There's a lot of psychological little twists that you just go, oh my gosh, that's deep. That's not silly. Like later chapters, like Freddy's Dead got silly. I mean, you learn to love it if you love Nightmare on Elm Street, if you love horror, or even Nightmare 4. Freddy got really silly. And then by the time you got into certain things, that's why I'm glad, like you said, Wes Craven's New Nightmare brought it back to, in a sense, like a serious tone.
Right. I like to say the Nancy trilogy is what I like to call it. Is 1, 3, and 7 is the most serious out of all the films. You know, the darkest ones.
Because I think I heard you mention that term once, and I think it was actually when we met Heather Langenkamp. Yeah. He called it the Nancy trilogy, and I'm just like, oh, this silly guy, Frank, is this horror nerd guy, poor bastard. No, but I'm just like, oh my God, this is the Nancy trilogy. I'm just like,
it's funny.
He was right.
When we met her and I mentioned to her that the Nancy trilogy and I used that term, and then she was like, I've never heard it called that before. That's actually really cool.
Frank originate the term Nancy trilogy?
Did I? I don't know.
I'm willing to say
I'll say yeah.
I'll say
for the
yeah
sake
too,
of argument.
I mean, he's the only one I've heard it from, but my God, it really, really is. And if you see it in that format, and especially if you consider the first movie as an opening to the series and Wes Craven's New Nightmare as the finale, then that middle chapter really definitely is Dream Warriors. So obviously we can talk about the entire series in depth and detail, but we really want to focus on Nightmare on Elm Street 3. So Frank, take us to the beginning of Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
So this movie, like I said, starts off with her in the dream world, or in the real world, Kristen, and she's doing this paper mache house of the Kruger house.
That was really cool. Yeah, it's a cool intro.
She gets told to go to sleep, so she goes to sleep. She has this nightmare where she's running away from Freddy, and she saves this little girl.
There's a scene next to the boiler room, and the little girl looks up and says, "Freddy's home." Mm-hmm. And if you know, like, the true origins they don't really discuss too much in detail, but the true essence of Freddy, that's a scary thought. Mm-hmm. So when I rewatched it this time, I'm like, there was this sense of urgency that I had this time around. Like, oh my God, get the little girl out of there. Yeah. And even when like she got to the part where she was like trying to run away and she was just kind of running in place, it was like, oh my God, it's a nightmare. Oh my God.
Yeah, you see Freddy behind her, like running at full speed. Like with his glove up.
And it really is like, that's the essence of Freddy. Yeah, I love that Freddy quips and he talks trash and all that. But the Freddy that I like is that scary one. Mm-hmm. And there's the room where all these bodies are hanging and it's just like, boom, she wakes up.
Yeah.
Or does she wake up?
Yeah.
So she goes into the bathroom. Mm-hmm. The sink, she goes to turn on the sink. The sink grabs her hand, which is kind of creepy if you think about it. And then Freddy's apparition appears in the mirror, and he takes a swipe at her. And then in real life, it turns out that I guess Freddy caused her to slit her own wrist, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, you took something kind of cinematic and jokey and kind of scary and tied it into a real life tragedy. And that's the one thing that kept sticking out in my memory. It's like, oh my God, this is not joking around. They're taking this very, very seriously. So then what happens after?
The next thing we see is Weston Hills, I believe. It cuts to Weston Hills, which is
UCLA.
Right, where we went to see these locations. And it's so surreal to see Weston Hills in person. It's so crazy. We get introduced to a few characters. We get introduced to Lawrence Fishburne's character, who plays an orderly. He
wasn't unknown, so it's just like, he's playing an orderly.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. And he does kind of bring, I hate using the word gravitas. It sounds like such a film geek word. But yeah, he brings some gravitas to it because he plays his role very seriously. Yeah.
And he's one of the more likable characters in the movie, even though it's not a huge role, but he's
very protective of the kids.
Yeah, he is.
And that's part of that, let's take this seriously. Mm-hmm. Max, played by Lawrence Fishburne, kind of starts it off, but then the Dr. Gordon comes in, and you immediately feel like he has this goal to better the kids' lives. And the kids come check in with him. It's this really nice thing. And he almost feels like this father figure who's there looking out for the kids. And I was just like, man, that's solid. That's solid filmmaking. That's solid energy right there, where you just go like, oh my God, this guy is a good guy and he's there for the welfare of the kids. And then you have Dr. Sims, this kind of older female, kind of mean, who kind of comes in, and there's a kid who's in a quiet room, basically a padded cell, and she's already making threats again. She's like, if he keeps up this behavior, I'll have to have him isolated permanently.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh no, it won't get to that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, I got Dr. Gordon's back. Dr. Gordon's there with us. And like you said, we're introduced to some of the characters.
Yeah, I think as they're like you said, dolling back, I think they kind of come in real quick. I think
like
Taryn,
Philip runs down.
Yeah.
He sees Taryn. He's like, you don't look so hot, kid. You okay? And she doesn't even address him. He's just, guess not.
Yeah. So we kind of get a little taste of a couple of the characters, and then we'll get to be introduced to them in depth a little bit later. And then I believe there's some kind of disturbance. Doctor, it's Kristen basically in the room.
Kristen has just been admitted into Weston Hills, and
they're trying to put her to sleep.
They're trying to sedate her, and anyone who has had a Freddy encounter does not want to be sedated. I mean, they sit drinking instant coffee all night and sodas and basically caffeining themselves. So she's reacting, and even just her reaction is very strong because she's fighting for her survival. I would assume she did not want to slash her own wrists.
Right.
But Freddy, in a sense, made her slash her own wrists, which is scary. So she's wanting to survive. She's wanting to live. And unfortunately, the nurses are trying to do something good, which they think is good for her. So she's fighting back. And then we get the coolest introduction. I think it's the coolest introduction to Nancy, because the orderlies can't bring her under control. The nurses can't bring her under control. Even Dr. Gordon comes in and tries to sedate her, and he gets kicked in the nuts.
Yeah.
And it's just like, there's no hope. She's sitting there with a scalpel and is just
she cuts Max at one point.
Yeah, she cuts Max on the arm. And then she starts saying the Freddy rhyme, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. And then Nancy comes in, and it's this grown-up version of Nancy that we saw in the first Nightmare film, and she's just standing there, confident. And it's just like, never sleep again. And just, Kristen, I just got goosebumps again. Kristen just gets disarmed, and she's just like, oh my God. And she just goes and hugs her, and like there's this look on Patricia Arquette's face where she's just safe.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh my God, yes. So Nancy's like our hero, someone that so at that point we have a really good introduction.
So up next we get, Nancy gets introduced to some of the patients. So her and Neil go into I believe it's Bradley Gray's character Philip's room and Kincaid's room. So we get introduced to Philip, who is the puppeteer, sort of. That's his hobby. And that's when he mentions that they won't give him a
he's like a marionette maker.
Yeah.
He's a puppet master.
Puppet master, there you
go.
I
didn't think about that till just now. But yeah, I think his are currently made out of like duct tape or something. And he makes an offhand comment that like, oh, they should be made out of wood, but they wouldn't give me a knife, or otherwise I'd, or something like that.
And then Kincaid, who is basically like the sort of hostile one, I guess you could say. I mean, he's not intentionally being hostile. He's just trying to,
He's combative. He's combative, but I think it's out of self-survival versus animosity.
Yeah.
And, even just having the characters give just a little slice of themselves, just knowing that they're good people, but they're people who have been through a lot. And we don't get to know exactly what it is. And we get little traces and hints with each character. But then after that introduction, the next time that they all meet and talk to Nancy is in the group, because there's still other members of the troupe that aren't introduced just yet. But what happens after the...
Before they do the group, actually, the next thing that happens is Kristen actually...
Next dream sequence?
Yeah, Kristen has another dream. And this time is a little different because she pulls Nancy into her dream.
Right.
Which is the first time we've seen
Oh, and that's the first time that we see...
That's when we see the snake almost tries to swallow Kristen.
Yeah.
Right. And then she gets free when Nancy comes and saves her. And that's when actually Freddy sees Nancy for the first time.
Yeah, and he goes, "You."
Yeah. And then I think they get out.
Yes.
And then that's when we do the group therapy.
Yeah.
And then that's when we meet all the other characters.
We meet Will, who is the boy in the wheelchair, who I guess had a suicide attempt. You have Taryn, who's my personal favorite.
Mine too.
I love Taryn. Through her character in the movie, she had been a very important part of my life as a young person, because I almost viewed Nightmare on Elm Street 3 in a therapeutic manner, because I was, in a sense, I mean, everyone's struggles are different, but I was, in a sense, one of those kids. I was one of those kids who struggled with fitting in, struggled with personal problems. So I identified so much, and I think a part of me had always well, not a part of me, I definitely crushed on Jennifer Rubin's character, on Taryn, and even just, you know, finding a similarity in terms of like, oh, it would be nice to like go and be in a place where I'm with other people who are also struggling, and if I were to meet a girl that looks like Jennifer Rubin. So she became a lot to me. That character did. So when I met her in person, I was thrown aback. I was just...
She was such a sweetheart too.
She was amazing. Yeah. And I mean, the best part for me, I mean, apart from the autograph, the best part for me was I asked her if I could give her a hug. And I don't know if I would do that these days now. Like, I think I'd be too scared because the convention circuit is a lot more about money and transactions versus the fan experience. Mm-hmm. But back then, this was probably, what, 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, this is
something like that. When I asked her for a hug, and I gave her a hug. And it was just so nice to, like, the person on the screen became the real thing, and you're literally holding her in your arms. And, like, that was the realization of a dream. And one of the reasons I crushed on Taryn so much was because the scene opens up. It's Will and Joey and Taryn playing some version of Dungeons and Dragons called Wizard Master. Mm-hmm. And I think those were one of the reasons why I started crushing on the character of Taryn so much, because I'm just like, co-ed dorm, like it's like a pajama party with a hot chick, and you know, she's got issues, I've got issues. You know, do I see a wedding ring in our future or something like that? And it was like, actually, that's what I had her autograph on the poster, because there's a line that Will says while they're playing this Wizard Master, and it says, "Your horse is sinking into the bog. What do you do?" And then she says, "I go to bed and get a new horse in the morning." And I don't know, for some reason, that's just one of my favorite moments, because it was just like, I think maybe because when I was younger, I mean, just being totally honest, when I was younger, like, interactions with women were very difficult for me, because, you know, I struggled a lot with a lot of different emotions and stuff. And so kind of like, it was like this ideal thing. It's just like, oh, I want that. I want to be able to be in a place where I can hang out with other people who have issues, because I have issues, and I want to meet a girl like Taryn. So then after that, they, because they all are, in a sense, under the Freddy's spell, under his antenna of destruction, they've all been visited by Freddy, so they have to sleep in shifts. So Will and Joey are roommates. Max puts them in to go to sleep. Will goes to sleep and Joey stays up. And then what happens?
Bradley Gregg's character Philip, who is the puppet master, it was also we forgot to mention is actually a sleepwalker. That's what he mentions. So this is basically where his character dies, and it's
spoiler alert.
I always love that we always say spoiler alert after we already say the spoiler.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah.
We always do that. This is actually my personal favorite death in the entire franchise.
Shut up.
Yeah, because I mean, it plays on his.
It's long and drawn out too, because I don't mean to cut you off, but when you're laying in bed asleep and you're partially clothed, you're very vulnerable, male or female. And it starts off with his own creation being what comes to life, the little marionette. Mm-hmm. It takes on Freddy's face. And then, and even that, remember when I rewatched it last time, I was like, that's creepy. It's like genuinely creepy that your own creation takes on Freddy's face, and then he slashes himself off, and then he pulls your sheets out, and there's Philip just in his boxers, and just like, ah! And it's just like, you know, he just like, that's the automatic reaction right there. And go on.
No, then he basically becomes Freddy's puppet. Was it his tendons? Yeah, it gets cut.
Yeah, like it's sliced from like elbow to wrist and knee to ankle, and they basically I don't know if it's tendons or nerves, because I don't think tendons are that long. Maybe they are. I don't know. I haven't been to med school yet.
yeah.
But yeah, I'm planning it for next week. And then he becomes a marionette, his own puppet. Yeah.
And then, so he walks, Freddy leads him or puppeteers him out of the room. You don't know where he's going. Joey's character kind of looks out the window and he sees Philip up on the tower. And Philip already having the suicidal tendencies, and
being a sleepwalker.
And the fact that Joey cannot speak or he chooses not to speak. Well, I think seeing his friend up there, you think he would speak, but...
You'd think so.
Yeah. But, well, let's say he can't speak.
Yeah.
So, he thinks that his friend's up there about to commit suicide. So he's waking Will up. He runs outside. He grabs like a tray of food. He tries to get the nurse's attention. He's waking everybody up, doing what he can to try to get help. And meanwhile, they can't see it, but you see Freddy up in the sky. He's sitting there like,
puppeting him, yeah.
And then he just takes his. They all rush to the window or like, fill up.
Yeah, that part was intense for me when I was seeing that because I'm like, okay, this isn't a joke anymore. This isn't, a fun slasher thing. It's a young man who's about to die, and it had a different like seriousness to it. And then here you have these young people who are pleading, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. And then here you have, I just got chills again. Here you have Philip, in a sense, kind of what happened to Kristen at the beginning, a suicide that he didn't want. And that, if you think about it, that's really messed up.
Yeah.
It isn't like, oh yeah, let's just say, who's the boyfriend, Tina's boyfriend in the first movie? Rod. He dies by suicide, but he's not suicidal. He's just like, that's just how he kills him. Or like Johnny Depp's character getting sucked into the bed. It's just like, oh, okay, yeah, they died. But these are kids who are struggling with this. They're struggling with their own, suicidal thoughts and things. And here Freddy's like taking the control away from them and is like, I'm going to end your life. So it's almost like the deaths are more serious, at least to me. And in a couple of these was just like, and that's something that you don't see in horror movies too much. You almost see it played up for violence factors, for the gore factor. But this was more psychological. He's making him commit suicide.
And it's very a smart way of Freddy to dispatch of this person because he's using that background and those, basically
it's kind of sad too because it's like, this is not, these were borderline kids that struggled, but this is not what they wanted. And he's such a manipulator, Freddy is, that he's making it seem like that he jumps. And in the next scene, they're in group therapy. And they even said, it's just like he let himself down. He let all of us down. He quit. And it's just like, even Jennifer, Penelope Sudrow's character says, Joey says it wasn't suicide. And it's like, he let, it was just like, all these kids are like, it was murder. That bastard murdered him. And it was just like, I keep getting chills.
Now, I forget who says it, but I want to say it was Will who said it. Like, I saw his face.
Yeah, Will
it wasn't suicide.
He was wide awake all the way down.
Yeah. That gave me chills when he said that. Like, I saw his face. He wasn't asleep. He was awake.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the things that sets the kills aside in part 3, apart from any other kill in the rest of the series. Although, Freddy does kind of, like with Carlos in Freddy's Dead, he has a hearing aid and he uses that to kill him. But he also does it in a funny way. He gets like a chalkboard and it's like, and this is not that. This is not silly. This is like serious.
That's why I say, like, I actually love this movie because of that. Freddy uses these, their background and their history, whatever, or their disadvantages, I guess you could say. And it kind of keeps himself hidden. He knows that if he makes it look like a suicide, this kid already, had those tendencies. No one's going to believe the kids, basically. And it's kind of a way for Freddy to be a clever way for him to stay hidden, in a way, if you get what I'm saying.
And you had mentioned earlier when we were setting up our set that Freddy doesn't talk too much in this one. And one of the cool things that I now see because of what you just said is that he doesn't necessarily have to because he's way more hidden. but his presence is still felt.
Yeah.
He's just way more hidden. And even that's a great point, because when I saw it yesterday, I'm like, I feel like you can feel Freddy's presence throughout, but you don't necessarily see him too often. And even that's like a great trick, because it's like, do you see the killer? Do you not see the killer? Like, what's scarier? But in this particular recipe for this movie, that worked out the best. And it definitely felt like this is the Freddy that you're scared of. And I'd only been scared of Freddy in 3 movies: the first, the third, and Wes Craven's New Night. I keep pointing because this is the VHS tapes. Because in 4 and 5 and 6, he's not scary. 2, he's kind of out in the open a lot.
Yeah.
So he's not as scary. So 1, 3, and 7, the Nancy trilogy and the Craven trilogy, he's definitely much scarier.
Yeah.
And that's something that, I mean, these days with a lot of jaded film goers, and Freddy's not scary, he's funny. Granted, yeah, but I mean, if you break it down and look at it, there are 3 movies where if you watch them when they were first made, or they were impressed upon you when they were first, before it became a cliche, Freddy was scary. Freddy was scary in 1, 3, and 7.
Kind of brings us to our next death scene,
Jennifer.
which is Jennifer.
The infamous TV death scene.
Yes, the TV that comes to life. Well, also another great kill of mine in the franchise.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. And I had when I met we met Robert Englund in San Francisco. That was the quote I had him write, which was "Welcome to prime time, bitch," which is just the coolest line.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of sad too, because Jennifer as a character is an aspiring actress. She wants to be an actress. Everyone laughs at her. That's really messed up.
Yeah.
And so she's watching TV for research, but she also wants to stay awake. So Max comes in and is like, you know, Jennifer, you know, time to go to sleep. And she's just like, I can't handle the nightmare, not after Philip. And it just goes to show, because most people, when they die in horror movies, there's no mourning.
Right.
But this one, it's like after every death, there's a heaviness in the air. There's a feeling of loss, and more chills. There's a feeling of loss. There's a depth to that is not in any other movies. I mean, you kind of feel maybe a little bit in the first movie, like Nancy definitely carries the deaths, but later on it just becomes like a body count movie, so it's not as strong in other subsequent entries. I mean, but in this one, it's like, you know, she doesn't want to handle the nightmares after her friend committed suicide, and that's pretty heavy.
And then Max, as great a guy as he is, he just kind of like finally agrees to, like, you know, let her be, and, you know, I didn't see you.
Like a father figure, yeah. And he's like,
I wasn't here.
I never saw you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so she falls asleep. Dick Cavett is on TV interviewing Zsa Zsa Gabor, and she goes to adjust the channels, and then arms break out of the TV set. A head breaks out, and it's Freddy, and he's got antennas for ears. Not really ears, but he's got TV antenna on his head. And he says, "This is it, Jennifer, your big break in TV." That's messed up, because this girl genuinely wants to be an actress, and she's telling everyone she wants to be an actress. And I've met people. I remember girls in high school that are like, "I'm going to be an actress," and it's like you'd never heard of them later on in life. So it's just like, it's messed up. He threw her dream, like her aspiration, her goal, in her face, like literally in her face. He sucked her into the TV in a sense, like almost bringing her into his chest, because the arms and the face are him. And that's messed up.
Right through the screen, just
it's messed up. Like, it's a funny death, I guess, kind of, sort of, and an infamous line, "Welcome to prime time, bitch." And then boom, it's just like, God, there's so many levels to that death. It's not just, you know. So then I think we have another group therapy session after that. So what happens during that group therapy?
So this is where Nancy kind of explains Freddy to them and who he is. And
yeah, that's when they all kind of gather on the same page.
Yeah.
And it's like, he wears a dirt. Like, they don't believe. He's like, "Don't humor us. We're not in the mood." And then Nancy's like, "He wears a dirty brown hat. He's horribly burnt." And they're all like, like they're all on the same page. And then I think it's Taryn goes, "Who is he?"
Yeah.
So then she gives a background story on that, and then she gives the reason that they're going to be able to beat him is Kristen.
She's the key.
Kristen has the key, because Kristen is able to bring people into her dream. She mentions earlier that it's a power that she had since she was a little girl. She was able to bring her dad into her dreams, and her dad always thought that those were his dreams. She brought Nancy into the dream with Penis Freddy, and so then there's that common thread there.
And she mentions that they are the last of the Elm Street kids, and that's why he's going after them.
Yeah, there's 5 more movies.
Right, yeah,
after
that's
that,
the
and a remake and a crossover.
Yeah. That's what she
either way,
says. So this is the first time it's said. So we're gonna go with this one.
We're gonna go with this one as definitive. Yeah.
She says try again. They do a group hypnosis, and then they don't notice that they're in the dream world yet until stuff starts, kind of weird stuff around the room starts happening.
But the best part, in my opinion, is when Joey gets up to go get some water and he sees the nurse that he has a crush on.
Yeah.
And even then, too, as a young, because you got to remember, I mean, I watched this from, I probably sound like a broken record when I say this, but probably from like, you know, I first watched this when I was like 12, maybe, no, 13 years old. And we all know when you're a male and you're 13, what goes through your head, and same thing goes through your head 20, 30 years later.
Yeah.
But either way, it never ends. But that's kind of your first exposure to it. So it's kind of like, you know, hey, you know, and the nurse, I mean, there's a scene earlier where Joey, you could tell Joey's crushing on the nurse. And then in this dream world, the nurse is returning that attraction to him. And she kind of calls him over, and it's just like, there are adult movies that start this way, right. You know, and it's like he goes and she's like closing the door and it's like, you won't tell anybody, will you? And unzip me and all this. And she has an amazing body. That's all I'll say. Unless you want to add something to it.
Her boobs are amazing.
Gorgeous body.
Yes.
It really helped with that whole scenario.
Yeah.
And you couldn't help but be Joey in that moment. You're just like,
yeah,
I won't tell anybody.
I won't tell anybody either.
Do whatever you want. Yeah. It was very, very cool. And but then the jacked up part is it turned out to be Freddy.
Right.
And then Dr. Sims walks in the real world as the dream world is collapsing in on them. And there are big ramifications to the events of that session. Joey's in a coma in real life. Nancy's been fired, I believe.
I think Nancy and Dr. Gordon have been fired because he's getting.
Oh, you're right. Dr. Gordon did get fired because he has to gather his stuff after. Oh, I think it's when when they're in Joey's in intensive care and they're just kind of standing there, and then the big honcho that runs the hospital has to, you know, he has to answer to people as to like what happened and why it happened. So Nancy and the doctor are fired. And then the doctor, as he's gathering his belongings, runs again into the mysterious nun who tells him what they have to do to get rid of Freddy, which is
find his remains and bury them on hollowed ground, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's the line that Nancy says where she says, only one man knows and it's time for him to talk, which is then the reintroduction of her father, played by John Saxon, who was a very important character in the first movie. And then when we find him again, he is in a bar, getting drunk, and he's been demoted to security guard. He went from like
sheriff,
captain or sheriff or something,
like
and now he is the demoted drunk security guard. So you can tell that this had real world effects on him, that he had to just kind of bury his sorrow and forget through alcohol and stuff like that. So then there's those moments where the kids are now left separated from the people that genuinely care about them. Max is still there, but you know he's not involved in their therapy. He's just kind of an overseer. So then you have the Kristen actually, you know, freaks out the fact that everybody got fired, and now she's put in the quiet room, and now they want to sedate everybody, and it's just like the stakes have just been raised up. So then what happens after that? So
basically, this is after they talk to her dad at the bar. She leaves. Nancy leaves. Neil gets up in his face, her dad's face, and is like, hey, you know what? You might not care what happens to Nancy, but I do.
You may not care whether she lives or dies, but I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he basically convinces him to show him where Freddy is buried.
And then you have these things happening simultaneously. You have that quest to go find Freddy's remains, and then you have Nancy needing to go. She says she needs to check in on the kids. She needs to do something. So then Nancy goes over to the hospital. Max won't let her see Kristen, but then he does allow them to see the kids who are in the TV, what's left of the TV room after Jennifer's attack and going into the television. After that, they basically go into another group. It's what they did before. They kind of go into hypnosis, and they're in the dream world, and then it's basically the final showdown. And so two things are happening simultaneously. You have them looking for the bones, and then you have the dream world. So,
and it's in a junkyard where his remains are buried. That's when they arrive. Neil and her dad arrive at the junkyard.
So then there comes a point when they're in the dream world where I think a bunch of feathers start. Because they're in the quiet room with everybody's all together, but then Freddy's knives start slashing up. So there's a bunch of feathers in the air, and they basically all get separated. Taryn ends up in basically kind of like her old neighborhood. Kristen ends up back at the beginning of the movie, which is kind of cool. It's kind of like a little bit of a Back to the Future thing where you're kind of reliving the same event, but her mom's like way nicer.
Yeah.
And then like there's a line in the first time around where the male guest says, "Elaine, where's the bourbon?" So then it happens again, and then it turns out, since it is a dream, Freddy comes in and says, "I said, where's the bleeping bourbon?" And cuts her head off, and it's just like dangling the head to her mom's head to Kristen.
And the head's talking to her, right?
It's just like, "Damn it, Kristen, what did I tell? Every time I bring a man over, you mess things up. You know what your shrink said, blah, 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 blah." And then you have, what else happens? Taryn. Oh, Will. Will is kind of just running away, and Freddy chases him.
And then this hallway or something, and then
there's like this wheelchair that looks like a torture device. And Freddy's kind of like, "You look tired. Have a seat." So he's like taunting him with his paralysis, which again is really messed up.
Like a damn bully.
But then he kind of does the wizard master thing. He blows up the chair, and unfortunately, Freddy gets him in the end.
Yeah, he gets like a shot. Like it says "Demon be gone" or something like that.
In the name of Lorette, Prince of Elves, demon be gone. He blows up the chair, and Freddy actually looks genuinely like shocked.
Yeah, because that's the first time he kind of saw like them.
So yes, the dream powers being able to affect him. So then he runs, and then Freddy's just like, no. He just literally like lifts him up, and it's kind of a weird death because he just kind of says, "I don't believe in fairy tales," and he just kind of knives him in the chest. It's kind of like
it's
kind of random,
anticlimactic.
Yeah, it's just kind of like and you could even tell like when they did it, like he didn't know where to place his hand.
Yeah,
maybe they had a different death figured out for that. But then you have Taryn's death.
Yeah.
Which is, again, kind of the messed up thing because, she had kind of struggled with drugs, and here he is kind of in her old environment. And, in the end, it's kind of cool, but, like, story-wise, it's messed up. He basically grows syringes out of his fingers.
The famous needle gloves.
Yeah. Well, technically, they're not gloves. It's just his skin.
Well, one is his fingers that come into the syringes.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, and the other one's his glove.
Oh, okay.
So there's two different.
I think I focused on the other hand that just had the skin on it. I guess one's a needle glove, and then one's a needle hand. Skin. Yeah. And I mean, that's messed up too, because it's just like, you struggle with drugs, I'm gonna fill you full of drugs. It's just like, God, man, you're mean. You're genuinely messed up, but you can't help but love Freddy at the same time. So then you have Will and Taryn dying, and then what happens?
So at this point, the film's about to wrap up. So you got the kid, everybody in the dream world that's regrouping right now. At the junkyard, they finally find the remains. His skeleton, Freddy's skeleton, comes to life in this beautiful claymation effect.
I think that's sarcasm when he means
It totally
beautiful.
is. It totally is.
I mean, watching it yesterday, I'm just like, you know what? It's not bad because all things considered, I mean, the time that movie was made, that's the only way you could animate a skeleton.
Yeah.
Apart from cell animation, like hand-drawn cell animation. So it wasn't bad, but I mean, I think the rest of the movie holds up to a very high standard of good filmmaking that it kind of sticks out as like a little hokey.
Yeah.
Maybe, but yeah. So then Freddy Skeleton comes to life and
attacks them, and then actually he ends up killing Nancy's father. So his character dies.
And it's kind of in the dream world before Freddy becomes the skeleton. This is actually the first reveal of the chest of souls.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting too because they don't make mention of it in the first two movies. Freddy says, "The souls of the children give me strength," because Nancy's remarking how much more powerful he is now because he's never been this powerful. So it's funny too because it's like you throw that in and it's just like, well, what does that mean? Is that every single person he's ever killed powers him? But either way, it's a cool visual. He just kind of rips his sweater off and there's all these little faces. And so then it goes from that to they all regroup. They end up in this like mirror hallway. And then I think because it is a dream world, like different mirror versions of Freddy grab each one, except for Joey.
Yeah.
And then what happens with Joey?
Joey, this is where his moment to shine, you know, whatever. He finally speaks. They're trapped in these mirrors, and he finally speaks up, and his voice shatters the glass, the mirrors, and saving everybody, basically. And then I think it cuts to, I think that's pretty much the finale, except.
Well, and then like you mentioned, the dad dies in a junkyard. Freddy says, I'm going to use this in a way to manipulate Nancy, even though Nancy doesn't know that the dad died in the real world. So then he comes over, and then it turns out that the dad is actually Freddy, and he uses that to kill Nancy.
Nancy dies.
Which is messed up because, and that's why I'm so glad that she came back in New Nightmare, which I recently rediscovered after we watched Nightmare on Elm Street 1 at the Screen Fest, the last Screen Fest screening of last year. And I never had such a high appreciation for that movie until recently. Because it was always just like, yeah, it's the one that's kind of weird. It's the one that's kind of not like all the others. And it's kind of cool, but I mean, it was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
It really was. So when you end up having a movie that's ahead of its time, when you revisit it and it's now not ahead of its time, it's now like right in tune with the cultural zeitgeist of what's happening, or even, back in the Scream days of being self-referential and all that stuff, you just go like, well, this is genius. So I'm glad, even though they killed Nancy in this one, they brought her back and the dad back and everybody back in the other movie. So it becomes a thing of like, this is the death of Nancy, the character. And it's really sad because you figure all these kids have been through so much already through their personal problems. And then Freddy's attacking them using their own personal issues to get to them. Half of them have fallen, and the other three, which is just Kristen, Kincaid, and Joey, are the only survivors. And then they just lost Nancy. And even Kristen crying over the dead body of Nancy. But at the same time, Dr. Gordon is actually able to kill Freddy with holy water and a crucifix. And that's kind of the end of Freddy for that particular film. Although it's, they're hardly ever definitive deaths, but it was a pretty good death, all things considered. And then you end up having basically a closure scene at the cemetery. And they're all kind of there. They're all burying Nancy. And I always thought it was like, that's kind of messed up. Like, I don't like the fact that Nancy died. Like, I felt like she should have lived, but I think that's one of the things that makes this movie good, is the fact that like you're not expecting Nancy to die, and yet she dies in a very kind of messed up manner. And it's a nice little moment of like wrap up, and then Dr. Gordon is asleep at the end, and he's sleeping soundly, so you assume that the threat is gone. And there's a scene earlier where Nancy has a Malaysian dream doll, And then there's the dream doll with Dr. Gordon, and then he kept the little paper mache house. But then, of course, in typical Nightmare on Elm Street fashion, it's never over, and the little light goes off in the middle, in one of the windows of the house. And then it's just, then you get treated to the wonderful sounds of probably the best rock song in a horror movie ever. I mean, there are some other good ones. There's like Man Behind the Mask in Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. But this, I think Dawkins' Dream Warriors is the best rock song because it's about the movie.
Right.
And it's an awesome song. So what are your reactions on the movie as a whole and what the movie has meant to you? And even just what meeting like the cast, because I know we've met a bunch of the cast, if not all the cast.
Yeah, I think we've met. I think that this is one movie that we've met like most of the cast of, from any other movie.
Yeah.
I like I said, this holds up as one of my favorite, if not my favorite sequel out of the franchise. But I do have one criticism about this movie.
Oh Lord.
No, it's just the fact that these Dream Warriors, they never really get the upper hand on Freddy. I kind of wish they would have made him a little bit more powerful. And get a couple. I mean, Taryn gets like a stab in. Will gets a little zap in.
Yeah.
I wish Kincaid would have kicked his ass a little bit because he's the strong one.
Yeah. He punches him a couple of times. No.
I think. And
then what's her name? Kristen jumps over him. Once
yeah, it's like
they're not very formidable.
Yeah.
They're Dream Warriors, but their warriors are not very formidable.
Yeah.
I mean, they are to a certain degree. At least I think this is probably the first movie where they fight back. Because, Nancy fights back in the original with her trap.
Yeah.
With her traps in the real world and stuff.
But she does more in that movie than any of these kids do.
True.
It's like...
Yeah.
Maybe
it was Bob Shea, who was kind of the godfather of the series, maybe saying, well, no, Freddy can't... We don't want Freddy to look weak or whatever. Right. But I never noticed that. Yeah, that they are kind of... They're able to get in a few licks, but they never, knock him out fully.
You never really see them as a threat to Freddy.
Unfortunately. Yeah, you're right.
And they all go really quickly. I mean, Taryn goes really quickly. Yeah. Will goes super quickly.
Will goes super quick.
Well, I just got to say that if I were to introduce somebody to this franchise, this would be one of the first ones that I would show them.
The best one. To show.
I hate to keep saying the Nancy trilogy over and over, but
say it. We need to put it out in the ether.
But I would maybe I wouldn't go out of order and just watch those three. I would introduce them to the whole series, but I would make a point to that they should enjoy these ones better than anything else to me.
I agree.
But
complexity of what Robert Englund brought to the character, and even just being able to use words like that, complexity, to a slasher.
Yeah.
And it's like that's what my impression is these days is I'm not dismissive about the films and the stuff that I like. There's merit to them. And the fact that we can sit here and discuss this is evidence of that. I think the very first time I watched this, I was at my cousin's house. It was a sleepover, but my cousin is 15 years older than me. So it was my whole family, my mom, my sister, and myself had gone over to my cousin's house, and it wasn't like I was hanging out with someone my age. So we had gone to a video store, which was inside of a supermarket, and I had wanted to rent Nightmare on Elm Street. I hadn't seen that particular entry yet. And he was super cool. He's like, get whatever you want. And so hidden from my mom, I got this Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 VHS rental. And I remember on the cover, let me see the cover. There's a little thing here that says, includes hit music video, Dawkins Dream Warriors. And as they mentioned in the Nightmare on Elm Street documentary, it's the first music video to be featured on a VHS cassette, in terms of this, a tie-in. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And I was treated to an amazing movie, and then at the end you get this amazing music video that goes with it, and the song is just fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's been a favorite of mine, and that's probably one of the reasons too why Nightmare 3 stands out so much for me. But being able to be treated to the music video was it was a treat. Exactly that. It was like the the caramel center to a chocolate bar. It was just like, what? It goes on? This is great. This is fantastic. I love this thing. But for myself, in terms of closing comments on this movie, like I mentioned during the body of what we discussed, this movie meant a lot for me because of what it represented. I was a kid who struggled with a lot of things as a young person, and seeing that there were other kids who also struggled, although our struggles were very different, it was like I could totally see myself at Weston Hills asking for help and saying, I'm lost. I need help. But there's just something beautiful that I hold very special about Part 3 Dream Warriors, and being able to meet them all individually. It was like meeting old friends, like having almost like a high school reunion, and saying like, I felt like saying, hey, remember that one time that I was watching you guys and I was making egg sandwiches or something, and it was just like, no, because that memory only existed for me. But that's the fact that they were all very gracious. I think for the most part, this is going to wrap up the second episode of season 2 of Terror Recollect. I would invite you to watch our third episode coming soon to a YouTube screen near you. And these episodes have been a lot of fun to do, and we're going to keep trying to change our format. So each episode may be a little bit different, and it's going to feel a little bit different, but I think that's part of good growth and even just trying new things in this format. And it's been very fun for us and for the two of you at home watching.
And that's the most important thing, is that
the two of you.
Yeah, that's the most important thing, is that no matter what our format, and that's one of the important things, is that with our format changing, no matter what, we're gonna have some fun with this season.
Absolutely.
So, and we got some pretty cool stuff to bring to you guys this season.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's one of the things, is we have a great passion of the horror genre in general. So we do have a lot of fun stuff coming, and we are excited to bring it to you. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and
see you next time.
See you then.
Ay, excuse me, senor. Oh, goodness gracious. All right.
As soon as we come back from the intro, I'm back.
Hey, guys.
Really?
Really, Lionel?
Just the fact that Frank has to call me Lionel.
You guys in for ourselves as well, and Frank is smiling and laughing. And...
it was a thing, and I was like, I always laugh at it. I usually hold it. Okay, you were doing good.
Yeah, not too bad.
Why'd you have to start that?
And you remember where to look, right? You're looking in the right place, right? Not the little screw hole in the middle, but like the camera lens to the right of the screw hole.
Yeah, totally.
All right, just making sure.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, I was gonna say everyone and guys, and I said, hey, kid.
What else is new?
Hey, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
Hey, everyone.
No. Explode at you.
A little bit
combative
there.
I'll fight. I'll fight you. Don't think I won't.
Like that?
Can't
do that?
I can't do it.
Man, I must be a genius or something.
You are. I'm bound down to you.
Or a circus freak.
So this movie starts off with it kind of starts. It takes an opposite.
Is there anything you want to say in closing in terms of this movie and just last thoughts on it?
No.